Hey there, wargamers and hobbyists, Justin the Arm Painter here from Death Ray Designs, and today we've got an airbrush review for you. The guys over at spraygunner.com sent me a Mr. Hobby PS-289 to review today, so let's get into it. Alright, so here's the package that the guys over at spraygunner.com sent me, and we've got the obligatory flyer with a little bit of an advertisement on the back for some paints, which these are pretty interesting. I don't know anything about them, but as I said in my last review video, I wouldn't be opposed to trying them out, but I don't know exactly what they're for. I just get really excited for new paint. So that did come in the box, and no frills, just chills. Here's the airbrush that they sent. Now, this is a Mr. Hobby PS-289. I'm not sure if it's actually supposed to be called a 289, similar to like a Badger Patriot 105 being just called a 105, or if it's supposed to be the Procon Boy WA double action. I'm not actually sure, but we're going to call it the PS-289 because if you go to their website and type it in the search bar, it's going to bring up this product. So I may be wrong in my terminology, but at least if you happen to follow this review and want to look up this product, you can find it with that designation. So on the box here, we've got the designation on the side of the airbrush, the name that I'm not sure about. You can tell it's Mr. Hobby brand, and because a lot of the other stuff is in Japanese, it's hard to get a feel for exactly what's going on here. Like down here, I'm not sure. I can tell that it says 0.3 version 2. But up here it does say 0.3 millimeter, and that is clearly referencing the needle that comes in here. We've got a picture on the side of the box with the contents, unfortunately in Japanese, and on the back a breakdown of the airbrush, also in Japanese. But I think if you're at all familiar with airbrushing, this should be pretty straightforward with you, and I'm sure you can find some guides and information online if you need something a little bit more in depth than that. In addition to sending the airbrush, the guys over at Spray Gunner sent me some other goodies to go with this, which are super useful here. They sent me the 0.2 millimeter conversion needle, as well as the nozzle pieces that go with that to facilitate changing the needle out. And because they watched my last video, they know that I use a lot of Badger products, and they sent me the quick release that will attach to this airbrush and allow this to connect up to my Badger hoses, which is super convenient because I won't have to worry about finagling and wiggling stuff to get this airbrush hooked up and working. I could just put this on there and get to spraying some paint. Now that we have the airbrush and all of its contents out of the shipping box, let's go ahead and actually open the airbrush and see what we've got inside. Whoop. All right, so we've got some information here that came in here, and you might not actually have to go online to find out all the information about disassembly. And actually it looks like while the packaging has Japanese, it looks like the instructions have English translations on here, which is really good. This is a breakdown of the actual airbrush and all of its components. I actually really do appreciate that. That's super nifty. One of the things that can be daunting for people who are new to airbrushing is just understanding operation, how to get things set up and get it going, and that by having that in a physical form where you don't have to go to the internet, you just pull this right out of your box and start looking. It can kind of alleviate some of the stress of not understanding how the internals work. I find a lot of people I talk to are worried about messing up an airbrush or not being able to set it up, and while this may look like rocket science, it's really not too bad, and being able to kind of see how things look on the inside, how things would be hooked up, and translate that into the physical world when you work with the airbrush is very useful. And we've got this other little dealio here, got a little Fallout looking character, and unfortunately this one appears to be in full Japanese from Mr. Hobby here. I think this is probably some type of guide that's for basic airbrush usage and explaining things. I'm assuming here it's basically saying don't soak your airbrush in this type of solvent, which that looks like a Mr. Hobby solvent bottle because I have one at home. And then something about complete disassembly, I don't know. So someone out there this might be useful for, but for us, not so much. Now let's go ahead and open up the actual carry case here and see what we've got for the airbrush. I do like the box. Foam seems pretty standard. We've got the little wrench dealio for disassembly. We've got this deal for throttling the airflow, adjusting. I guess it's kind of like adjusting your pressure, airflow, similar. I don't really use these too often, but you could hook this up into your line going into your airbrush to adjust the airflow if you wanted to. And then we have the actual airbrush beauty here. It's got a cap on the top here for preventing paint spills, which is really nifty. And for any of you guys who've been following me for any length of time, you know that I use a lot of Badger products, and unfortunately, not all their airbrushes come with these caps. Now, some of them do, and I'm sure you can order them, but it's nice that it comes with the package because when I'm airbrushing, especially with minis and I'm moving around on my desk, a lot of the times I don't realize what I'm doing with the airbrush, and then I'll look down and I've spilled paint all over my pants or something. So this is a really nifty feature. We've got another area here to adjust the airflow coming out of the tip of the airbrush, similar to what you might use this for. We've got a little rubber cap here protecting the nozzle. And at first glance, I feel like this nozzle / needle protector may actually obscure your ability to get in there and clean dry tip very quickly when you're working on your projects and your miniatures. However, that may be a little bit of a personal preference. As someone who works with a lot of Badger airbrushes, I am used to my needle being exposed and being able to clean dry tip quickly. And even on my Badger Chromes, which come with the fork tip, I'll usually just replace that with something else because I like being able to get to the needle to clean it. That said, if you are new to airbrushing, this may actually save you some money because inevitably being new to airbrushing means you're going to make mistakes and screw something up, and dropping your airbrush or moving it wrong or dinging it on a table without having a protector means that the needle gets bent and you have to replace it. So this right here is not really a deal breaker for anyone, I would say. I think it's more of just a personal preference, and the more comfortable you get with airbrushing, the less likely you are to need a protection like this. But I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it and have to replace the needle because I messed something up. And finally, we've got the hose that comes with the airbrush here, and this is probably my first complaint with this particular airbrush, and it is a slight one because you can just get a new hose that fits your personal preference. But out of the box, you get this kind of flimsy, rubbery, plastic kind of hose dealio, and given what I do for a living, which is working with miniatures, obviously, and painting them a lot, I tend to have sharp objects around all the time because you use those for cleaning miniatures and things of that nature. It's going to take one wrong swivel in my chair and this thing grazing a very sharp object to potentially cut it or something of that nature, and I feel like this is likely to have to get replaced because it's probably the cheapest thing in this box. Assuming this airbrush performs well, which we'll be getting to later in this video, this may not actually be a deal breaker if I'm honest. It's really easy to replace a hose and just buy one that fits your personal preference, but that's just a slight complaint that I have right out of the box. However, the silver lining is, at least if you're getting into airbrushing and you're new and you're not sure exactly what you need, by picking up something like this that has everything you need minus a compressor, you're really good to go. But with that being said, we're not going to be using this airbrush hose today. We're going to be using the threaded Badger hoses that I'm more comfortable with, and the guys over at Spray Gunner knew I was going to want to do that, so they did indeed send me this quick disconnect like we'd mentioned before, so we're going to be using those hoses. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and check out the field stripping of this airbrush and see how easy that is to do. So for the field stripping of this airbrush today, we're going to start off by seeing if I can tackle it without having to worry about the instructions. As someone who's been working with airbrushes for a while, I want to see how easy this is to just grab and go and see if it's easy. It looks like the back casing here is similar to a Badger, which I've got one here for reference. Inside my little goodie bag, we've got my Badger Krome and my Patriot 105. Now I brought those with me today so I could do some compare and contrasting as well as a little bit of airbrush work to show the differences in spray as well. But for this purpose, we're going to show what I was talking about with removing the casing. On a Badger, this looks very similar. That screws right off. Very simple. The one thing with the Badger airbrushes that I use is that the retention nut here for your needle is exposed, so it's real easy to get to. That's one feature I do like because I can just loosen that and pull the needle back and then tighten it so that it's not exposed at the end, which we had talked about previously when comparing the needle protector / nozzle here. This one doesn't have that, so when I store it and I'm done with it, I go ahead and pull the needle back so it's not exposed. But on that note, now let's see how easy it is to remove the casing on this one. All right, just as easy as the Badger. And it looks like we've got a little setting here on the back that you can tighten and loosen. That's going to impact how far that needle can slide back, which is very similar to the Badger Krome. It's got something like that as well, except this one actually has some numbers on there so you have an idea of what you're actually setting. This one does not, but I'm going to assume that that does that. When we put this back together, we'll actually check that to verify, but I think that's probably what it does. We've got the retention nut here for our needle. Slides in and out very easily. Let's slide that back a little bit. Let's see how the internals come out. So that's pretty straightforward. That's a little bit different than what the Badger has because theirs is exposed. And normally I would recommend being very careful when doing that because you don't want to bend the needle, but I've pulled everything out because I want to keep it together. Looks like the needle comes out and it's got this little piece right here that sits down and would be pressing down in here to allow the airflow to come out. So let's slide that back down in here. All right, I found getting that seated back in there is a little bit more complicated, so I'll do a quick cut there. It's not too bad once you get it in there, but it's not the easiest thing. So let's go ahead and check the front here. That screws off pretty easily, and you can expose that if you don't want the needle guard on there, which is pretty awesome. And these are all hand tightened on here, so that's exposed very easy. I'm not going to pop that off because I don't want to lose it. No reason to do that unless we were swapping the needle. So there we go, hand tightened on. And let's go ahead and slide this back in there very gently. When you're doing something like this, you want to make sure that you don't bend that needle. So it looks like that's set properly against the trigger. Let's go ahead and slide that forward and tighten that up. And tighten. Good to go. Always loosen that, give it this little tap, 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 tap. Don't have to push too hard, but I find that a little tap, tap gives it enough force to make sure it's set properly and firmly up there at the front. Let's go ahead and put this on. Hand tightened. And like I said before, we're going to go ahead and test this. So we'll just torque this all the way down. Yeah, so needle doesn't move at all. Loosen a little bit. Needle goes back a little bit. All the way. All the way. So let's put it back to about half. Yeah, so it's a little bit more than half right now. So this is fully tightened. No movement. Little loose. Little movement back. Full out. Yeah, so that gives you a little bit of flexibility if you want to have a very consistent spray pattern every time. Now, I do want to show a quick comparison here with the disassembly of the Patriot 105 because that is generally the premier airbrush that I recommend, and I feel like I would not be doing you guys a good service if I was not comparing this to my workhorse. So let's go ahead and grab that 105 and show you the disassembly on that very quickly. So much like the Mr. Hobby 289 here, here's our Badger Patriot 105. That comes off. Now with their housing here, the internals, it's got two areas. So you've got this smaller kind of choke thing right here that loosens, and there's two different points. So that loosens and it's releasing pressure on a spring in here that impacts the trigger pull. The tighter it is, the more stiff that trigger is going to be in terms of back pressure. But if you'll grab the whole thing and give it a little turn, you can remove the housing just like you did on the Mr. Hobby. And with our needle out, we can go ahead and pull out the rest of the internals here. Let's not lose our little needle chuck there. Don't want to lose that. All right. And that's pretty straightforward for a Badger. I'm not going to pull this off. This is a little bit tight because this is my workhorse and it's been tightened up. One of the things I will say that's very different is this piece that sits up against the trigger and allows it to slide back and forth. On the Mr. Hobby, that's not exposed up here, and when you disassemble and pull the needle out, it's a very, very tiny piece, and it's going to be a little bit more finicky trying to slide that whole housing back in. So that is a slight difference between the Badger. I feel like this one's pretty straightforward and easy, but in terms of field stripping, this one's a little less finicky. So it's something to be aware of when you approach working with this one. As I mentioned in my previous product review video for the no-name brand air compressor from Spray Gunner, I think it's a good idea to have some of this thread tape laying around. If you're doing anything for airbrushing, you're always going to want to have this. You never know when you're going to need it, but it's super useful. Now, to get this airbrush ready for our Badger hose, we're going to have to hook up this quick disconnect, and having a little bit of this thread tape on the threads is going to help minimize the possibility of having an air leak. If you haven't watched that product review video, I'll drop a link in the comments below. Check that out. With that being said, let's go ahead and get this guy threaded up and ready for the hose. So for that, we're going to go ahead and open up our box here. Should be pretty straightforward. We've all opened up boxes before. Pew. Quick disconnect. So we're going to go ahead and grab our thread tape here. We won't need it too much. We're going to get our hobby knife. Be careful, don't hurt yourself doing these things. Don't stab yourself with a hobby knife, folks. I'm going to go ahead and come in here and slice off a little bit of this thread tape. There we go. Then we're going to come over here to our airbrush and just slide that around. I find that it's okay if it overlaps the airbrush and doesn't look super nice. What matters here is functionality, not looking pretty. So we've got coverage on the threads. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that bad boy down. I feel like that's pretty good. We got a nice hand tighten on there. We've got our hose and quick disconnect. Pop that bad boy in. Oh yeah, we're getting some flow. It's working, that's exciting. First time you hook up a new airbrush and you want to use it, it's really exciting. It's hard to explain. I guess it's kind of like getting a new video game from the store and you pop it in the disc tray. I mean, I guess if you guys played those kinds of video games, Maybe new people just play on the computer. But it's like that. You pop it in, you can't wait to get the controller and start playing. That's how it is. As soon as you press, it's like the on screen for that. It's like, pew, ready to go. So that being said, we're gonna go ahead and do some spray patterns so we can compare the PS-289 from Mr. Hobby to my Badger Krome and Patriot 105 so you guys can kind of see what it'll do in terms of the tightness of a line and things of that nature. For my example here, I have a piece of plastic with some names written down. We're just gonna do some spray patterns under each column with each airbrush so you can see kind of a compare and contrast. Now, initially I wanted to do these two parts on camera so you guys could see the spray, but I found holding this at an angle and spraying these fine lines and stuff was very, very difficult. That, and I was having some trouble with the airbrushes. I'm perfectly comfortable with my Krome and my 105 for the most part. However, for whatever reason, the 105 looks like it's got tighter lines than the Krome. And that's probably because I just was like, did this one first and then did this one and was, you know, had gotten warmed up for the day. But I was also having issues thinning down my paint. Normally it's not a problem, but I was using a bottle of black paint we had here that was a little bit older and it was a lot thicker than it's supposed to be. Normally it's ready to go because it's pre-thinned paint. So I was trying to get the mix right to thin a pre-thinned paint to come out of the airbrush and was having some issues with speckling, and normally it's not a big problem. But I think you can kind of see what we're able to do with the 105 and the Krome in terms of dots, straight lines, goofy little not very good looking smiley faces, and letters. This is why I don't do airbrushing on t-shirts and why I airbrush miniatures, because all I have to do is do gradients and colors. I don't have to do fine details and lines. But I wanted you guys to see what these two airbrushes were able to do so we can compare it to this one and see if they look kind of similar. This is not my forte. Again, I usually do miniatures, but that will give you guys kind of a basis for what this is capable of. Now, I'm going to try and do some spraying on camera here, and we'll see what we can do. Much like the other two examples, let's start by doing a couple dots. That's super smooth. I'm using the same paint here, and maybe I got the mix right. I don't want to blame it just on the tools, but those look super clean, super clean. Let's try our hand at doing a smiley face. Super duper clean. Let's try some straight lines here. Checking for dry tip. Spray in the back of our hand here, make sure we aren't having any issues. And let's try some lines. Let's get a bit of a wider one here. That's smooth. That's real smooth. I was going into this and I was concerned because I'm a Badger guy, but that's impressive. Let's kind of throttle it back here and get a much wider beam. Yeah, that's huge. Now, because I'm concerned that I wasn't doing my due diligence with the Badgers, we're going to come back and try and do one more side-by-side comparison and see how these perform. All right, so I've got my Krome loaded up here, and we're going to try and follow this line here. Now, it's a little messed up because I spilled some water on it and had to clean it up, but we're just going to see if I can get something similar and make sure it was operator error and not the airbrush. So let's see what we can do. All right, so that's similar. We're getting a little bit more speckling, but it's very similar. All right, so top one's the 289, which again, it's got a little mess up here because I had to wipe off some water I spilled. And then the bottom two here are the Krome, and that looks very similar. I don't think it's too far off. For whatever reason, I'm getting way more dry tip on my Badgers today than I'm used to, but I don't think it's purely the airbrush or the paint at this point. I think some of it just could be a little bit of operator error. I'm going to come in with the 105 on this side and do another streak or two just to verify that it was not the paint and whether it was operator error or the airbrush. All right, so I've got my 105 loaded up with some paint, and let's do a couple streaks next to this one just to compare. Okay, yeah, so I think a lot of it was just the paint mix. Maybe a little bit, my airbrushes are kind of dirty. But let's do a bigger one next to this one with the 105 because it's got the larger needle for me and just see kind of what we get. Okay, I mean, it's comparable. I do feel like this is really clean, though. It's very smooth. I'm pleasantly surprised with how well that performed for an airbrush I've never heard of. Yeah, and so, like, this has been my issue. I'm not sure if the speckling is pure dry tip, pure airbrush, or what's going on, or why this one didn't, have the same dry tip or speckling concerns. Was I too close? Was I too far? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, as you can see, I've done a lot more comparison with the 105 and the Krome to try and compare to the 289 here because I was concerned that they might not be living up to what I'm used to. And I got to be honest, I'm impressed. I'm honestly impressed with that. This is just basic spraying on a piece of plastic card, basically, just for basic, like lines and dots and seeing what you can do. I'm pretty pleased. The one thing I will say as we get ready to clean this airbrush so that I can set it down, always clean your airbrushes. Don't let paint dry in them. It'll mess them up. It's just not a good idea. Clean as you go. But one thing I can say is, the comparisons, I feel like the 289 is coming out a little bit cleaner than my 105 and my Krome, which have been workhorses for years. I would be curious to see how the 289 is performing like 6 months from now with the same heavy use working on miniatures. And if it's still putting out the same clean patterns without as much speckling, fair. That's the major difference I could tell you right now with these is I have used these long term and maybe there's some wear and tear on it. That's on me, I don't know. But at first glance, I'm super impressed with the spray pattern so far. And to take this to the next level, I do have a miniature here with me and I'm going to spray down some colors on that, which will give you guys a kind of a look into what I actually do versus just spraying on a piece of plastic card. So let's clean up my airbrush and we'll transition and do that. The miniature we're going to be testing the 289 on today is Scarface. This miniature is from Corvus Belli's Infinity the Game, and it's one of 2 miniatures currently that I've reserved for doing airbrush tutorials and testing. Today we're going to be using the 289 to spray down some green colors on this particular miniature, but in the future I'm really excited to work on Iguana, which is another mercenary tag from the Corvus Belli line, or it might be from the Nomads, I'm not sure, but it's either a mercenary or Nomad from their game, and I'm really excited to follow Angel Giraldez's Masterclass Volume 1 and 2 books where he does airbrushing work on miniatures. And he works with the Harder and Steinbeck airbrushes specifically, so that miniature is reserved for when I can finally procure one of those airbrushes to work on. And then I've got a couple of miniatures for my Warhammer 40K stuff, as well as my US Ariadne forces for Infinity that I'm really excited about doing some other airbrush work with as well. So whether it is a product review or tutorial, be on the lookout for those videos. Recently, I've done some work on a Dreadnought for one of my commission clients from Forge World with my Patriot 105 and my Krome, and I was really happy with the transitions I got. But based on the transitions we got here and the spray patterns from the 289, I'm really excited to see what it can do on this one, and then I'm really excited to see what it might be able to do for me on future projects. With that being said, let's jump right into this and start getting down some colors. The first thing we want to do here is we're going to come in and we're going to lay down some zenithal highlights. For that, we're going to be laying down some primer coats to get that gradient transition. We're going to be coming in with Stynylrez Gray from Badger. And the thing that's really exciting about this is it's going to be able to test this airbrush being able to spray some primer paints through, which are a little bit different than standard paints like we did on this. Which I'm really excited to see how the gradients come out of this airbrush on the model, because this right here, these little dots and the patterns that we got here with the 289, lead me to believe I'm going to be able to get some really cool gradients on here. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start spraying. All right, so that's handled the first layer of zenithal highlights from the primer. We are going to go ahead and clean out our airbrush, and then we're going to be coming in for a more extreme highlight with our primer white from Stynylrez. So we've got our white loaded up here in the airbrush, and I'm really excited to start spraying down the extreme zenithal highlight from the top on this model. And the reason I'm excited is because white has proven to be a really annoying color to work with on models. You know, whether you're working on Stormtroopers or white scars for Warhammer 40k, or maybe JSA for Infinity, which have a lot of white armor, if I recall. The problem with the white is it tends to speckle. It's got like thick pigments or something of that nature, and it's a pain in the butt. Well, I'm wondering how this airbrush is going to tackle it, and this is also a primer white, so we're going to see. Let's go ahead and check that out. So we're going to go ahead and spray on the back of our hand here, make sure we got all that cleaning solution out, and the white's coming out of our airbrush fine. Looks good to me. So let's go ahead and start spraying at the top and make sure we leave some of that gray showing through. All right, I think that white came out very nicely. I did have a dry tip issue, but much like working with other airbrushes, you just take your airbrush and pull it on back and just blast in the back of your hand and try and dislodge that dry tip if you can. That's one issue I was talking about before with this little needle protector, is that it can be hard to get in there and clear the dry tip on the fly. Having a soft bristle paintbrush nearby so you can kind of get in there and just do a quick little rub across the needle to get the paint off is ideal. But in this case, a quick little spritz with a higher PSI on the back of my hand dislodged it and got me back to airbrushing really quickly. And I'm really enjoying this transitions, these gradients I was able to get with this airbrush very, very quickly. So now we've got those gradients down, it's time to come in with our green colors and see what those look like over this. For that, we're going to be starting with Sewage Water from Minotaur. And we're going to be trying to hit all the dark areas and leave some of the white and gray showing through. Now, I'm not a pro at working with the Infinity models, but I am trying to follow some of the color schemes on their website. So let's go ahead and get in here and start spraying down some of this color. So we've got our initial layer of dark green down. It's time to let that dry, change out the color in the airbrush, and come in with some of the lighter green from the top and get that cool gradient and transition. For our next color, we're going to be coming in with Fantasy Games, Scale 75's Slimer Green. Normally I would be coming in with a Swamp Ground over Sewage Water here. It's a bit more of a subtle green or an Army Drab kind of green using the Sewage Water and Swamp Ground colors from Minotaur, but I wanted to try something a little bit brighter, more contrasty. We're going for high sci-fi here with an Infinity model, and in their photos it's a little bit more on the kind of lime green color. So we're going to try it out and see. And at the very least, if it doesn't look super good, at least we will know how this airbrush handles. So with that being said, let's jump right in. Right, that was quick and easy, and we've got a nice, interesting transition from that light green into that dark green. Now I'm going to come in for one more layer here and do a more extreme set of colors from the top to really make this pop. And that's really where this thing's going to, you know, kind of dictate whether I'm really excited or not. I want to make sure it can get those nice smooth transitions and leave things on here that we've laid down before. So for the next layer of green, we're going to be coming back in with Slimer Green from Scale 75, mixed 1-to-1 with Pestilent Flesh from Minotaur. All right, there we go. That is what I was going for. It definitely toned down that green a little bit, and I think this looks very similar to the photos that they have online. We are going to change our color out one more time and see if we can push the shadows a little bit with an ink, and then we'll get on with the rest of this product review. All right, so we're coming in with a hodgepodge of paints here. I'm using some FW ink mixed with our original Sewage Water, thinned down with some AK Interactive airbrush thinner to get a nice, thin, kind of green tinted black ink. And what I want to do here is come in and enhance the shadows and spray down in those areas and try and respect where the light colors are and just kind of push the depth here by making this darker. You push that light source up and make it look lighter. So we're going to come in and try and hit some of those low points and see how this performs. I'm really enjoying this so far. I think the the ink is really going to push those light sources up for us, and I think that looks really awesome. I'm having a lot of fun with this. All right, I am really liking how that looks. I think that adding in those shadows really enhanced and pushed the light source forward, and from this angle you can really see where the light source is meant to be, and then when you kind of turn it over here, it obviously looks like a hodgepodge of crap, but when you rotate it around, it starts to look a lot better, more interesting, and very cool. I've got to be honest, thus far I am super impressed. I was not sure what to expect going into using this airbrush, but I think that looks super awesome, and this guy is ready for hand detail work to bring him to life. We've got all the base coats down for the airbrush. We could come in and do some masking and spray other colors. I know in the official product photo, his little leg plates here are black, but for this photo, or this video, I just really wanted to come in and play with the green colors. I think it looks really cool. Like I said, all we gotta do is come in, start hand detailing, edge highlighting, and this guy is gonna be tabletop ready real quick. One of the things I like to do with cleaning is back flushing or backwashing. This one's a little bit harder to clamp this off to force the air back up into the reservoir to either mix paints with the bubbles or to clean it out. So one of the things I have done is you can just screw that off very gently. You don't want to mess up the needle. You can pull that needle back so it's not exposed. Just make sure you hold it back, don't stab yourself. Come in with your airbrush cleaning medium of choice. Spray some in there, get your paper towel, and hold this and spray. Backwash is just fine. It can help dislodge some of that paint that's in there and force it up into the cup and let you clean it. And if chunks come out, you just spritz water into here and dump it into your trash can or whatever, and prevent those chunks from getting down in here. So I'm a big fan of cleaning as you go, making sure your tools are cleaned after each use. Maybe not quite as extensive as I do with cleaning between colors, but the last thing we want to do is allow paint to dry inside of any airbrush. That's going to be a nightmare for you later on. So with our needle still back, we'll just slide this back on and release, and we're good to go. So we're gonna go ahead and spray out the excess, finish cleaning our airbrush, and then we'll get into a side-by-side comparison for pricing on the airbrushes that I like to use or that I own, and this one. So we've done some extensive review of the airbrush so far. We've done the unboxing portion, we've disassembled it, reassembled it, compared it to the Badgers, and we've laid down some awesome paint on this miniature. Looks super awesome. Really excited to start working on the hand painting and detailing on that model to get him done and ready for the tabletop. But the one thing that you guys are probably interested in at this point in this video is, what are the price points? What's the breakdown? Currently, my two main workhorses are my Patriot 105 and my Badger Krome. The 105 bundle on spraygunner.com's website currently is $88. It includes the base brush and 2 additional needles. That's an extremely good value. A Patriot 105 for 88 bucks with 2 needles, and a standard base Patriot 105 for 70 to 75 is a steal. You can't go wrong with that. 88 bucks and you get 2 extra needles with it, which is usually like 10 to 15 bucks per. Primo price, super awesome. The Chrome's coming in for $110, and it's a 2-in-1 combo, and it too comes with an extra needle, and the Krome is a little bit better than the Patriot generally quality-wise. Don't let this video fool you. My airbrushes are worn out. I've been using the crap out of them, and I feel like for whatever reason, the beat-up Old Faithful here, my 105, outperformed my Krome. I don't know why. It's my airbrush luck. It's the way that it is, but you can't go wrong with a Krome if that happens to be what you have or you pick up. But a 2-in-1 combo for $110 is really good. Now that leaves us with the airbrush that we compared to those two today, and that is the Mr. Hobby PS-289. This comes in at $115, and it includes everything that came in the box. So you get the airbrush, you get the cap, the little wrench, the regulator dealio, and the airbrush itself. It does not come with the extra needle and nozzle, stuff like that. I don't think I saw one on their website that was a combo, but there might be one, so don't take my word for it on that one. I did do some research on the pricing, but I wanted to find the base model for exactly what they sent me in the box, not the extras, so I knew exactly what I was comparing. Now, for $115, that's putting this airbrush as a contender for the Krome, and it is a bit more expensive than the 105. Now, my personal take on this, $115 versus $110, I'm not too worried about that extra needle because I'm lazy. I don't like to pop the needles in and out unless I have to. That's why I like the quick releases. That's why I like to have extra airbrushes. So I have one that's got a larger needle for base coating and stuff like that, and one with a smaller needle for detailing. And one of the things we didn't get into in this video is that 0.2mm needle that is available. Again, I don't know if they have one in a bundle right now. They might, so make sure you check their website. But the standard 0.3mm that this comes with is frankly badass. I'm very pleased with this airbrush, and as a Badger guy, I went into this concerned that I wasn't going to like this, but at the $115 price point, this puts it as a contender for being a very good alternative to the Krome if you want to try something other than a Badger, and compared to the $105, which is an extreme value if you want something that I feel has a little bit more control and some more features. The price difference between their bundle, which is an amazing value, is not too bad. So with the price breakdown done, and hopefully that didn't sound like I was too much of a Badger guy, but I want to be honest with you guys. I don't want you to think that simply because SprayGunner.com sent me an airbrush that I want to give it a good review, even though it's not. That's not the case. I gave my honest opinions on the 105 and the Krome, which I love to death. I love Badger. Customer service is great. Their airbrushes are generally good. This was new for me. This is a completely new airbrush, something I've never ever seen, never heard of. And until like 2 weeks ago, I'd never heard of Mr. Hobby, and I ordered some washes from them to be using on my actual tabletop minis. And then serendipitously, if that's even a word, the guys from SprayGunner sent me an email and said, hey, we liked your last review. We're going to send you something else. They sent me this, which is super exciting. Like, I can't believe that I got sent an airbrush, let alone something that I enjoyed. I was shocked. I looked at it and I was like, all right, I'm not sure what this is going to be. But I'm telling you guys, the price point is good, and if you don't have any necessarily brand loyalty or super preferences and all things are held standard, you can't go wrong with picking this up. I've been preaching the good word in terms of picking up Badger products for years, and again, you can't go wrong with those. There's nothing wrong with them. But today on the chopping block is the Mr. Hobby PS-289. Is it worth a buy? My honest opinion, yes. It performed really well when we were doing these. For these purposes, it's better, or at least comparable. If you assume after 6 months, a year of heavy use that it looks similar, okay, sure. But right out of the box, it looks fantastic. Not a lot of speckling. The transition here, which right here, this one is the 289. The one next to it is the 105. It just looks smoother. I don't know what it is or why. And again, I'm super baffled. I really went into this thinking, okay, this is an airbrush I never heard of. What's going on? All right, they sent me this cool thing, and I'm blown away. I initially was thinking that if this was at least comparable to my 105, that I was going to pop on stream and be like, hey guys, this is a good alternative. It's pretty cool. Let's do a giveaway. Unfortunately for my Twitch viewers and so forth, that is not the case now. I'm keeping this airbrush. It's too good. I really like it, and I'd like to thank SprayGunner.com for sending me this to review, and hopefully you guys will go over and check this out on their website. At the time that this video is going up, it is Thanksgiving week, which means that Black Friday is coming up and Cyber Monday is coming up on the Monday after, of course. So I'm not sure what their deals are going to be, but at $115, I think this is a steal. And if you pop in on their Black Friday deals or Cyber Monday deals, maybe they'll have something better. I don't know. So be sure that you check those out. If you guys haven't already gathered from watching this video, though, I do stream over on Twitch. So if you have any questions about this airbrush that you'd like to ask me while I'm live, make sure you check me out at twitch.tv/ampservices. Or if you don't want to pop over on Twitch, make sure you sound off in the comments below. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, let us know if you have any questions or thoughts, and if you want to see me review something else in the future, make sure you sound off for those products and let us know. Whether you guys are in the market for a Badger, an Iwata, a Harder & Steinbeck, a Pache, if I said it right, or maybe one of these Mr. Hobbies, all I can really say to you guys is make sure you check out the SprayGunner.com website and pick up an airbrush. It's going to change your life if you're working on miniatures, I promise. If you're on the fence, take the plunge. Drop some comments below if you have any questions or want any help. Make sure you check out my stream. I can help you live if you have any questions. And as always, keep painting, keep rolling those dice, and I will catch you guys next time.